talking about dispelling misconceptions. Let's take a look at Cadence-Lypso. Now, first of all, it's pronounced in Creole, Cadence-Lypso. But in fact, in English, it would be Cadence-Lypso. Now, why did I name it as such? The word cadence, as you know, means rhythm, and lipso is a suffix of calypso. In Creole, we pronounce it cadence-lypso. And I chose cadence or cadence because it is a cognate, meaning it is a word that exists despite different pronunciations in both English and French and even in Creole. I defined it then as a synthesis, a fusion, a mixture, a marriage of two dominant musical forms of the islands, that from Haiti, which is Creole, and from the English-speaking Caribbean, mostly dominated by Trinidad, Calypso. And this is how the name came about, Cadence-Lypso or Cadence-Lypso. Now, how did this come about? Many people, including producers at the time, promoters, they thought that this is indigenous of Dominica. No, this Cadence-Lypso thing is Dominican. It's somewhat, I like to say, like Einstein, who is an Israeli, who was, but he was not born in Israel. Similarly, Cadence-Lypso is Dominican because of Dominican parentage, created by Dominicans, but in Paris, France, under circumstances where the group Exile One was playing a dance, not a show, but the repertoire of the group at the time was funk music, soul, reggae, spelt G-A-Y at the time, and the audience applauded but didn't dance. The promoter asked me, being band leader and singer, to make the people dance. So what I did was I asked the band, mainly the bass player and the drummer, to modify their way of playing from Calypso, where the bass drum at the time was a doop, 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 and bring it to the Haitian style of one, doop, 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 and the bass, rather than the many notes of Calypso at the time from groups like the Trade Winds, simplify it to doom, 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 simplify the bass and the bass drum, and the rest could play Calypso the way we played Dominican Calypso. And my job was to sing the same repertoire but in Creole. Now, importantly, the band comprised of a few young guys, except for Fitzroy Williams, who had previous experience playing with the Gaylords. But the Gaylords was never a Creole band. They sang one or two tracks in Creole, but they were not known to be a Creole band by any means. And whatever Creole they sang in Calypso style. Now, I had spent about 2 years with Les Vikings, the Vikings of Guadeloupe, which was a Creole band. And the dominant dance music in all the French West Indies was the Haitian music, Cadence-Lypso and compas direct, or direct as they said, with a K at the end. And I knew all about it. Besides, I spoke at the time fluent French and fluent Creole. The guys of Exile One had just been invited to do the album which brought us to France, and they could hardly speak Creole. As a matter of fact, I remember the bass player, Vivian Wallace, someone telling him bonjour, which means good morning or good day, and he replied, aujourd'hui, where they had just learned. But aujourd'hui, in fact, meant today. He replied today. The guys are not rural guys at all. They come from Roseau, the capital of Dominica, where this diglossia thing has people being ashamed of speaking patois, Creole. So I had a bunch of young men who were not very Creole in any way, neither linguistically, language, nor musically. So I had to boost them, encourage them, and we struck, and they did very well, combining the two ideas, and I had no difficulty in singing in Creole, and the crowd started dancing, and this is how Cadence-Lypso was born in Paris, France. 44 Rue de Rennes, that's the address. Now, very important is the spread of Cadence-Lypso. Someone, Baby Shore, guy from Martinique, professional dancer who worked with a record company, was at that dance. He gave me his card to meet the head of the record company where he worked. We met for discussing an album, but the executive didn't want an English album, much to the disappointment of I was very disappointed, and the rest of the group. We never wanted to be playing any Creole or Creolized type of music. We had our mind on the mainstream international quote-unquote market. In any case, the record company offered to pay twice and get 2 albums because they insisted that the Creole thing, whatever we did at that dance that had the people crazy, this is what they want. So we went into the studio, and fortunately, I was able to write the 2 albums in very little time. Now, it may sound crazy, or we might hear that probably the others in the band may have contributed in the composition, but let's be real. We're talking about a few 18 to 19-year-olds who had never been previously to a studio except to do my album that was previously arranged, composed, written, and I played the keyboards on most of the songs. I also played the guitar at the time and demonstrated exactly what I want. And we were given like 24 to 48 hours to come up with 2 albums. I had no difficulty doing that. And that's what we did. Now, these 2 albums, one in English, one in Creole. The English one, I don't know if we sell 12, we probably sold a lot. But the Creole one that we didn't want to do became a tremendous hit throughout the Creole world. We were in Paris on tour, and then we heard reports, it was carnival time, that everybody was singing songs in Martinique and in Guadeloupe. There was even a band that called itself Atata Combo, based on one of the tracks on the Creole album, and in French Guyana, and in Reunion Island in the Indian Ocean. And we couldn't understand that, and there was a great demand for the group Exile One. Now, what is interesting about that is our producer of the very first album, which took us to Paris, he didn't want me to sing in Creole at all, because I began my recording career with him singing soul music in English, and because of 2 hits that I had, one of which was distributed all over the world, and his label became somewhat famous. Our recording, titled Love, was the first production from Guadeloupe to have been exported to Jamaica, to Barbados. And when I say exported, was manufactured and distributed in these countries, and in France, of course, in Suriname, which was a Dutch colony, a colony of Holland at the time, and that song became a hit in Holland through Rotterdam. And Debs decided, after hearing or seeing the great hit, he decided to he wanted a Creole album immediately. So we went to Guadeloupe, went to the studio, and gave Debs. And there again, I am blessed to write songs with some ease, the capacity of writing songs. Went into the studio and wrote this album. At the time, the recording techniques in Guadeloupe were not as sophisticated as in France. So this was the second album on the Debs studio, or label in fact, on the Debs label. The first one was self-titled with only English. The second, Exile 1, and the third, they were done in France, one in English and one in Creole. This was the fourth album, but the second on the Debs label, and it was titled Face au Public and presented as a live album, but in fact it was yes and no live, because it was recorded live in the studio all together, but applause was added to give the impression that it was a live concert in somewhere, but it was done in studio. And Fitzroy Williams, the keyboard player of the group Exile 1, was absent, and throughout the lifetime of Exile 1 there were times where he wasn't there. So I played all the keyboards on that album, and this is the first time that the word Cadence-Lypso or Cadence-Lypso was ever used, and it can be seen at the back of the jacket of that album. And so this album was mainly in Creole, and there was one track that was added after, recorded, a song by Fitzroy Williams titled Hit Me With Music, when he came back from his absence. And this song was recorded to permit him to become a member of SACEM, which is a French copyright society, because the song was previously somewhat of a hit in the Caribbean, but he had no copyright protection. And I decided to put that song on the album for the purpose of letting him benefit from his work. So this, in a nutshell, is the backstory of Cadence-Lypso.
À présent, moi, belle personnalité en moi, adapté à you. Et en fier de moi.